let's talk for a minute. So, we're going to talk about officers for just a minute here. What's an officer? Who are these people that stand up at meetings and they talk about all the things they do, and occasionally they talk about reporting to their superiors, and sometimes they talk about having deputies, and they have different jobs, and some of them even have names that aren't even in English. So we're going to do just a quick overview of the offices in the SCA at the local level in this case, and the briefest of summaries of what they do. But before we do that, we need to talk about what in general all officers do as part of their basic job. First of all officers are part of the administrative arm, as it were, of the SCA, and all local offices, they answer to a higher level office. In my kingdom, local answer to regional most of the time, and then regional answer to a kingdom office. In some kingdoms, it goes straight from local to kingdom, so there is a tiered system. And then from kingdom, those offices also have a superior at the society, and you'll hear some people talk about a society officer, a society knights marshal, or a society minister of arts and sciences. So understand that tierage is there, and that relationship is one of information being passed down to the locals, guidance, new information, available class, and so forth, and also feedback up to the higher level offices of people like this, people don't like this, we're showing strong participation in these fields are no longer practiced. It's a line of communication. These are part of the officer relationship up and down the chain of command, as it were, within the administrative arm of the society. So let's just go down the list here, and I'm going to summarize for you what each office does. Now, first office we're going to talk about is the seneschal. By the way, that word is, I believe, German. I've been playing for almost 2 years before I learned that it was a German origin. Seneschal is, nominally speaking, the club president, though that's not a fully accurate analogy. They are responsible predominantly, their major unique function in the society is only a seneschal can sign a contract. Now, why is that important? It sounds pretty niche, but you have to sign a contract to rent a pavilion for a practice. You have to sign a contract to rent a campsite for an event. You have to sign a contract to rent a convention center or to rent golf carts. These are all contracts, and contract representation is very important with how the SCA works. So the seneschal is the only office. The seneschal, their deputies, are the only ones that can sign contracts. And that's a large part of their role. And another one is, again, kind of alluding back to the president analogy, the seneschal is also responsible for maintaining the good conduct and smooth running of the group. Now, that doesn't mean they are a police officer. They don't go out and enforce rules per se. But if there is a conflict between two people, or if there are two personalities that are butting heads, it is presumed to be the seneschal's job to either intercede and try and find a peaceful resolution, or to facilitate someone else stepping in, trying to find a peaceful resolution for the good of the overall group. Next office, the herald, of course. Now, there's a whole video, which I will link in the show notes, as to what the term herald encompasses. But a local herald, generally speaking, is responsible for maintaining and providing heraldic services to the local group. Now, does that mean they have to actually do all the services themselves? A lot of times they do provide them themselves, but that doesn't mean they have to, and it doesn't mean they have to be able to. As long as they can point to someone and go, if you walk up to a herald and say, I would like to register a name, or I'd like to research some arms, or I want to register a badge, or I need a tournament heralded, or I need a site heralded, any of the heraldic services. As long as the heraldic officer can go, I've got just the person you need to talk to, go talk to them, or go talk to them, or I can help you. As long as any of those options are filled in, then the officer is doing their job. So, Chronicler. What does a chronicler do? Chronicler, they're predominantly responsible for collecting articles and publishing the newsletter each month or quarterly. That kind of varies by group. But a chronicler, long and short, to use the modern analogy, they're the newsletter officer. Now that's not as simple as just collecting articles. They're also responsible for getting releases for any imagery or articles used, documenting it, filing reports, getting their report to their kingdom superior. It's not a simple slamming together a newsletter type job, but it is newsletter centric. That is their primary focus. Reeve or exchequer. Now, what are these strange words? We're back to what words? What words are these? Reeve and exchequer are both historical titles. Exchequer, of course, is English. It's still used today. And the term Reeve is, I believe, Middle English, possibly Old English. I don't know. I'm not a linguist. I couldn't say that with certainty. But in any event, in the modern setting, the Reeve or exchequer of a group are the financial officer. If you have to do anything that involves the disbursement or reimbursement of money, you're going to be going through the Reeve. So, financial officer, it's pretty straightforward on that. Minister of Arts and Sciences, MOAS or MOANS. There's a million abbreviations, and you've probably seen a lot of them online. Minister of Arts and Sciences, in a nutshell, is responsible for facilitating the arts and sciences and its instruction and practice at the local level. That is their job. Now, does that mean they have to be an artisan themselves? No, it doesn't. What it means is they need to bring in teachers. It means they need to let people know when there are competitions or classes happening. Their job is to facilitate. Their job is to be the administrator who makes sure current or prospective artisans know about activities or classes relevant to them. And they tend to publish in the newsletter. They tend to make announcements at events. There's a lot of social media presence now. So that is their focus. Hospitaller. There's another office. And I know some history nuts when they first joined the SCA, they hear Hospitaller, and they think it's something to do with fighting because, of course, the Knights Hospitaller, which was a very historical fighting group. To put some context on that, the Knights Hospitaller draw their names because they were originally founded to protect the places where pilgrims would travel, which were places of hospitality, which is where we get the term hospitable or hospital from. A hospitaller is a newcomer's officer. Their job is to provide new members with answers and resources. Now, what does that mean specifically? Generally speaking, they're there to answer questions or connect you with people who can answer questions. And also, hospitallers tend to manage the collection of the group's loaner garb. Loaner garb being outfits that are donated by others that can be loaned out so that you, a new member, can have some attire for an event or practice without having to make your own garb immediately. Web minister. Now, web minister is pretty straightforward. That is the person that maintains the website. Some web ministers are also tasked with maintaining social media presence. In other groups, web ministers are separate, and there's a social media deputy that handles the web presence. In other groups, there isn't a separate social media officer, but the seneschal will handle that. And I'm saying this because the primary focus of the web minister is the maintaining of the group's website. And whether or not that job also includes social media presence, or that individual includes social media presence, that is handled kind of on a case-by-case basis. So the one common thread, though, is web minister is responsible for maintaining the group's website and making sure the information there is up to date. And yes, I have this written down because I do not have these offices memorized cold. Knights Marshal. Do we have, actually the marshal community as a whole, there's several marshals under here, but your marshals are responsible for the safety and good conduct of all of our martial activities. Knights Marshal, of course, handles chivalric combat. Rapier Marshal is responsible for safety and good conduct and education, of course, for the rapier combatants. There are archery marshals, thrown weapons marshals, knife, axe, and spear, and that's even that abbreviation isn't accurate because now we have a couple of other throwable weapons. The entire marshalate community now, do they have to be practitioners in what they are marshaling? Not technically, but the overwhelming majority of marshals I know are practitioners in their field. Knights marshals almost always are heavy weapons fighters. Archery marshals are almost always archery shooters. Thrown weapons marshals traditionally are long-standing thrown weapons practitioners. So that's a tradition, but not a requirement. But the martial community's number one focus is safety. They are there to make sure that everyone walks on the field safe and walks off the field safe with no injuries. That is their primary focus, with a very strong secondary focus of education. I draw that distinction because some people think, well, I have to be a good fighter to be a Knights Marshal. No, you have to be a safe fighter, and you have to be trained in how to run a list field and a practice safely. Skill you can import. You can bring someone else in to run classes and train with. You do not have to be a good fighter to be a Knights Marshal. You must be a safe marshal to be a Knights Marshal, or any of the marshalates. One of the other marshals that doesn't get a lot of coverage, as it were, is the siege engineer, or siege marshal. Again, the same general rule. You are you're responsible for good safety and conduct. In this case, it's with one of the SCA siege weapons, which can be catapults, ballistas, trebuchets. I mean, we've got a whole list of things that throw our foam weapons, or in some case I've heard some unconfirmed stories. They'll load up a trebuchet with a bowling ball on an open field and see how far they can lob it. You know, there's a safe way to do that. So those are the marshalates. What else do we have? The youth officers, Minister of Children, and the youth combat marshals. First of all, Minister of Children is responsible for making sure that the children's activities are organized and take place at events, and some cases at meetings. They're not a babysitter. Let me be absolutely clear. There are rules about dropping kids off and who can be left with who. Ministers of Children must go through an SCA background check. That's part of the requirement. To be a current MOC, you must have passed the SCA background check. It's probably one of the more scrutinized offices, obviously because it's dealing with children. But its primary focus is interacting with kids, giving kids things to do at events with a medieval theme preferably, and generally engaging with a younger generation. Or youngest generation, really. Now, as far as the youth combat activities, the SCA does have provisions for youth combat, and this ranges from the foam weapons for the youngest fighters, and it progresses up to the provisions for legal minors, I believe 16 or 17 years of age, to fight in full heavy combat or full rapier combat with parent permission, and so many check boxes hit. And there are specific marshals that oversee these, because these rules are different from the adult combat rules, and the standards are different. And those marshals, again, are safety focused. We have equestrian officers. They're not terribly common because not everyone owns a horse, unlike the Middle Ages, where if you were noble you had several hundred horses. But equestrian officers, again, are responsible for safety and good conduct of horse riding competitions and events. Again, they're part of the martial community, so safety is their primary focus, with instruction as a very, very strong secondary focus there. Now, are there other offices? Yes, I'm pretty sure there are. Have I forgotten at least one or two? I probably have, and you're going to fill up the comments for me. But what does all this mean for you? What does all this mean for you, the new member, or you who's coming back after only a couple of years off or whatever? I want you to understand that as complex as the officer corps looks at first blush, and it does, let's just be fair. all these people stand up in funny clothes and they give these strange titles, and they use verbal shorthand because everyone else knows it and we've never heard it before, or it's been years since we heard it. It can be daunting. It can very much make you feel like an outsider who doesn't understand what's going on. That's a very fair summary of how it can feel to hear these officer reports for the first time or read their emails. I want you to understand that these offices, a little bit of what they do and who they are and who they answer to. And more importantly, if you have a question about one of them, I want you to be able to go, wait, I heard this about your office. Can you tell me more? I'm curious. Do you want to learn about Minister of Arts and Sciences? Do you want to learn about Knights Marshal, Archery Marshal? Do you want to learn a little bit more about maybe money handling, exchequer? These are things you can ask about, and you're not obligated to do any of them. You don't have to be an officer, but you can ask. You can, there are plenty of offices that I've sat down, I bought someone lunch over, and we talked for an hour or two. I ultimately decided the office wasn't for me. I didn't want to do it, but I'm more than happy to have the conversation. So that's what that is. I want you to understand what all these titles mean, what they do, just a little in summary. And are there more questions to ask? Oh, absolutely. If I were to do an exhaustive conversation about the officers in the SCA, we'd be here for a few hours and you'd be bored senseless, and so would I. But I want to give you just enough so that if something tickles your ear or something catches your attention, you're like, oh, wait, tell me more. Tell me more. I want to know more about this. Because that is how we learn. We ask questions. So that is my spiel for today. Hope you walk away a little better informed. But I look forward to seeing you all at the next event. Goodbye, and God bless.